I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Where are our prophets now? Where are those messages God chooses to communicate divine revelation through? In the past, the Creator has sent prophets like Abraham, Siddhartha, Jesus, Muhammad, and many more. Maybe our higher power has switched tactics since we reinterpret God's words as soon as the Creator's prophets leave us. Could it be that Spirit talks to each one of us individually and we haven't learned to listen? On Words of the Prophets, our modern prophets show us how to find the internal prophet that is the I Am, and we discuss the application of spiritual principles in all aspects of our lives. Love and light, everybody. I'm Reverend Phil, and I'm your host for Words of the Prophets. Today, my guest is Pavandeep Kaur Khalsa. Hi.
Satnam, greetings.
Greetings. Pavandeep is an integrative wellness coach and a Kundalini Yoga instructor. Today's prophetic topic is live more freely and fully. This topic comes from a translation of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, Chapter 3, Verse 18. The translation of that sutra reads as follows: through sustained focus and meditation on our patterns, habits, and conditioning, we gain knowledge and understanding of our past and how we can change the patterns that aren't serving us to live more freely and fully. So what this opening encompasses is two things. We're going to deal with how to live more freely and fully, which you're going to hear an amazing story by Pavandeep that really testifies to the power of spirit. And we're also going to learn how yoga, meditation, and a few other character practices change our lives. But I'm going to shut up and I'm going to let Pavandeep talk. Start wherever you want.
Wow, where does one begin? So I guess I'll just give some background. When I was growing up, I grew up in a typical dysfunctional family. Basically, a lot of alcohol, drugs, abuse, secrets, shame, dysfunction. But I realized from a very young age we were putting a mask on. We belonged to a congregation. I attended Catholic school, and everything was kept secret. And I just felt innately that wasn't right. And my life spiraled out of control at a very young age due to the involvement of drugs and alcohol in my family. I was introduced to drugs very young and was sold into human trafficking at 14 years old, and spent about a year or so of my life in captivity in conditions that a lot of citizens in the United States want to believe don't happen here. It happens in some dark place in Cambodia or a basement in a bar in Russia. But even at this time today, there's an estimated, and I would think it's a conservative estimate, of 300,000 minors at risk of being trafficked just here in the United States. So that was a part of my story. And when that occurred, there wasn't human trafficking campaigns. There wasn't awareness around human trafficking. There weren't legislations against it. So after my experience, I was basically criminalized as a juvenile, judged by the court system, by police officers, and basically blamed for what had happened to me. And I was never able to fully connect with my story or realize that it was something that had been done to me. Again, I kept up with that same pattern I had learned in my family, the secrecy and the shame and hiding what had really happened. So I was introduced to recovery, the 12-step recovery programs very early.
I got to cut in here just one quick question.
Absolutely.
Did your family pretend like nothing happened when you returned?
Basically, I was accused of lying because my family did have a part in it. One of the family members, at least, had an active role in what had happened, and it was the epitome of denial. And anybody who's experienced drugs or alcohol in their life personally, or being a family member of somebody who's addicted to drugs and alcohol, knows that's a primary symptom in the disease of addiction, is denial of reality on whatever level that looks like.
Okay, I wanted to put that out there because I think people need to hear how dysfunctional we can really get.
Absolutely.
That we don't like what we're hearing, it never happened. Don't lie to me.
Absolutely. Cognitive dissonance is a big issue in this country and in our society.
Break that up for people who haven't read DSM-4.
So cognitive dissonance is a phenomena where something blatantly happens and we can completely twist our perception to fit our belief system. No, it didn't happen, and be in complete denial of the reality of the events, and therefore never be in touch with the truth and not be able to move forward and heal.
And let's get to a more basic level. Before healing happens, we have to have some sense of trust and safety and security.
Absolutely.
Where does that come from?
Initially, it's supposed to come from the family, from the parents, from mother and father being involved in the child's life, not even at the point of birth, but before birth. The supportive, loving, and home environment when the child is in utero.
Yeah, and when that's not there, that's what we're going to do. I'm just building up so people get a better feel and a better understanding of what it took to walk the path that you took.
Absolutely.
So let's get out of the psychotherapy and let's get into the spirituality.
All right, so like I was saying, introduced to 12-step rooms, was in some programs as a juvenile that was really encouraged to go on, well, not encouraged, mandated to go out on survival camping trips. And that was my first experience of connecting with spirituality at that point in my life. And I remember being in the Appalachians, walking out by myself, and just looking out over Chimney Rock and feeling this connectedness that I had never felt before. For the first time in my life, since as far back as I can remember in childhood, I actually felt like I belonged on this earth, that I had some sort of purpose and connection with all the life that was around me. And it was being in nature that gave me that connection. It wasn't relationships with therapists, and it wasn't psychodynamics or group therapy or any of that. It was nature that first gave me that inspiration.
Okay. So there was a recovery element, a 12-step element, which is spiritual. Was that contributing, or that just kind of paralleled it?
Not at the time. I couldn't relate to the 12-step rooms. I was 15 when I started attending, and to me it was a lot of older men and women smoking cigarettes and drinking coffee and complaining about what was still going wrong in their lives, and I just could not relate. Couldn't relate to the stories of drinking formaldehyde in World War II to get drunk. There were just so many things that I could not connect with, but it was an incompatible behavior. So it did serve its purpose, and by no means do I want to discredit the power of the 12 steps, but at that time in my life I could not connect with it at all.
So what happens next?
So my stint in recovery lasted only about a year or so, and I had convinced myself that I could intellectualize my disease and approach my disease through behavioral changes. And I struggled with that for, I would say, a good 8 years, attempting to confer college degrees, getting jobs that looked good on paper, a nice house, a nice car, just anything that made me feel validated in society and what I thought it meant to be successful in society.
The Charlie the Tuna syndrome. We look good, but we don't taste good.
Absolutely, absolutely. So I spent 8 years of my life in that way, still trying to battle with my addiction, trying to control it, trying to rationalize it, hiding behind things. And again, that denial, not being honest with myself, and then having the shame that that's who I really still was on the inside, and not dealing with the core issue. So that came to an abrupt end in 2008 when I was in a near-death motorcycle accident that was alcohol and drug-related. had anterior grade amnesia, ended up homeless. My entire facade fell apart, basically. I could no longer keep up with the song and dance of my charade. So that's what provoked my moving out to Santa Fe. And looking back, I can say that these events that have happened in my life that I looked at as tragedies were truly the biggest blessings, because they forced me to do 180s on the path that I was on. So I moved out here, and my path to healing started about 5 years ago.
So you got more involved in the spiritual aspects of your being, so to speak.
Yes, basically, I'm a big believer in synchronicity, and there were just signs in my life that I could not deny, and step by step, things just kept falling into place. I was forced to look at my alcoholism and ended up back in the rooms of the 12 Steps and Narcotics Anonymous, lovely fellowship out here in New Mexico, and I started just asking the universe. I wasn't sure of my beliefs or what I was doing, but I knew I was supposed to be here, that I was not going anywhere. And by here, not necessarily Santa Fe, but in this life, I had to find a purpose. And it started with meeting a Lakota medicine man, and that happens to be part of my heritage, so I really connected with that aspect. And I would go to lodge a couple times a month and pray that I could heal my lineage through whatever work I was doing. And shortly after that, I had another series of synchronicities where I had gotten lost on my way from Velarde into Santa Fe, ended up at a college that I said I would never attend. My ego just felt I really needed a conferred degree from a more reputable college, and I recognized that I was there for a reason, went inside, saw a flyer for Kundalini Yoga for addiction recovery, and being that I had coincidentally quit using alcohol and drugs month and a half or so before that, I felt that it was a huge sign. And I had been practicing yoga on and off since I was a teenager. I'd always been drawn to it, but never felt it was complete. And I had never heard of this style of yoga, and I signed up for the course, and it's completely transformed my life.
How?
How? Well, I would say, first of all, it brought me into my body. After years of being traumatized, I did not know what it meant to be in my body. I had no connection with my physical form, and other ways it taught me how to take care of myself, how to eat healthy, how to connect with my values. I had always tried to intellectualize my values in life and think that I was doing the right thing, but never able to connect my actions with my thinking and connect my heart with my head. So I would say those are the biggest gifts. Essentially, Kundalini Yoga gave me the gift of self, and for me that's been the greatest gift of my lifetime.
So let's segue into, let's talk a little bit about history of yoga, and then we can get into the quotation. You want to talk a little bit about the history of yoga?
So I'm by no means an expert on the history of yoga, but my understanding is it's quite a foundation in history. Some scholars contend that yoga, a systemized form of yoga, goes back 100,000 years and was re-systemized every 20,000 years or so. However, there's not a lot of concrete evidence or scriptures until about 1800 BC. And we were introduced to the Vedic period, the realm of the rishis, and the cultural foundations of yoga. And then there's periods, epochs such as the Upanishadic periods. And Upanishad itself means to be near and meditate. So we can see it transforming through culture and becoming more and more established. Eventually, somewhere between, I believe it's 800 to 200 AD, the system of Raj Yoga and Kundalini Yoga became known. And that was delivered through a dream that King Janaka had. It's a long story, as most Hindu stories are. But basically, the root of it was he had this dream, and it seemed so real. And he couldn't differentiate what was real, whether his dream was real or the waking reality was real. So he sought out all of these spiritual teachers and holy men in his kingdom, and there was one who finally answered his question and said, neither are real. It's what's inside that's real. So that was the beginning of the lineage of Kundalini Yoga, which is a Raj Yoga, Raj meaning royal. It was never meant to be in the hands of commoners. It was more for royalty, as it was the ultimate way to liberate one in this body through the combination of mantra, mudra, asana, one-pointed focus. So it's really an interesting system, and the fact that later on through the progression of yogic history, it did come into the hands of the people. I can't remember what period it was, but the practice of sadhana became pretty well known. And sadhana in Sanskrit means accomplishment. It's your daily accomplishment of getting up early in the twilight hours before the sun rises to communicate with God and to communicate with yourself. And the word yoga actually originates from the Sanskrit word yug, meaning to yoke, to unify.
Yeah.
Right, the union of yourself with God consciousness, with that universal Christ consciousness. So it eventually reached, this mystical practice reached the common day person, and it became the path of the householder, the quickest way to reach enlightenment without becoming a rishi and spending the rest of your days in a cave meditating.
You know, and that was the whole, not the whole thrust, but one of the big thrusts of the Bhagavad Gita was the talking of the three yogas that were practiced. And that's going to segue into this next topic, but too many people out there think yoga is just a bunch of postures. And we're going to show some postures here a little bit later. But yoga is a whole lifestyle, and in the dialogue between Arjuna and Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he's talking about the Raj Yoga, Jnana, and Bhakti Yoga. Jnana is the intellectual approach, and Bhakti is a devotional approach.
Right.
And then he kind of says, well, they're all equal, and there's a fourth that's equal, but it's a little bit more equal. And that was karmic yoga, which is the path of service. Yeah, I mean, so this yoga stuff has been a lifestyle. It's not just going out there and stretching. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. I just wanted to add one thing in there. The periods you mentioned were when they were put to writing. And there was an oral history that went back even further, you know, that you're right, 10, 20, 30, 50,000 years, you know, we don't know. I mean, It was just a tradition kept handing down that the Vedas were the first of a series of writings, you know, that came out. So let's talk about, I guess the best way to start it is let's talk about Patanjali's Yoga Sutras.
So in the Patanjali's Yoga Sutras, there were 8 limbs of yoga that were identified. The first one being samadhi, the awakening and absorption completely in the spirit, realizing that we're not just these bodies. We're human beings we're not just human beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience.
And samadhi is basically disconnecting. It's almost like nirvana. It's that disconnection from the body. So, I mean, it comes first in our list, but it's actually the result of all the rest of the stuff.
Absolutely.
You know,
Absolutely.
this is the goal.
It is the goal.
Yeah.
And maybe that's why they listed it first. But you're absolutely correct. Through all of the other principles and the philosophies of a yogic lifestyle, we do reach the samadhi.
Yeah.
So the first one, I guess technically, would be dhyana, which is deep meditation, learning how to shut the mind down, quiet the mind. Every single spiritual path all over the world, the one goal has been to quiet the mind. why do we want to quiet the mind? We want to quiet the mind so the mind isn't the one in control. We want our soul to be in control, and that's how we step into the blueprint of our life.
I'm going to throw you a curve here.
Okay.
Why don't we start at the back and move forward, because the meditation is what leads to the samadhi, and we're giving everybody listening, watching it backwards.
All right.
So let's start at the front end.
So we'll start at the front end with the 5 restraints, the yamas. So the yamas, the 5 restraints include non-stealing, non-hurting, non-possessiveness, truthfulness, and sensory control, which is huge, the sensory control aspect. And I don't think it's a concept we're very familiar with here in the West.
Explain it.
Well, we live in an instant gratification society. Everything is instant email, instant messaging, fast food.
Contradiction in terms, by the way, but that's okay.
Absolutely. And in our culture, we're oversexed. There's sexual exploitation. There's not a lot of emotional control. So that, I would say, they're all cornerstones of the yogic practice, but that is definitely a very important one.
So let's put this in a little context for a second. Mm-hmm. What we're starting to do is develop the concept of duality.
Yes.
I've got a human side and I've got a spirit side. And so the first starting on this path, de-emphasizing my human side, non-hurting. I mean, we hurt people physically, emotionally, verbally, mentally all the time, Backing off that, non-stealing, non-possessiveness, all those things are a demonstration of what I call ego on the human side, truthfulness and sensory control, what you were just talking about. So we're starting to build a gap between the spiritual being and the human being.
Yes.
Continue.
Okay. So then comes the niyamas, which are the 5 disciplines, and those include purity, contentment, zeal, devotion, and surrender. Again, some things we may not be in touch with in our culture.
And now they start to bring us to a place of feeling at the connection really to the spirit.
Yes.
And now what we're going to get into in these next 6 limbs, which we've covered the last 2, we'll go back on them, just put them into sequence, is how do we now really build that spirit?
Well, through discipline. It's through the practice.
Yes.
The body is a temple. It says that in so many different spiritual paths. And in order to reach that deep state of meditation, in order to be absorbed in the spirit, we need to purify our body. We need to learn to not be so attached to the material. We need to practice the restraints. If we're unrestrained, we're acting as if we're in animal form, and the human consciousness has so much more potential than the level that most people function on.
And I'm gonna loop this back to your story. This is where the healing really comes from.
Absolutely.
That deep-rooted, deep-seated spirit that's in us, each and every one of us. How do we get there? And I'm not here to, Pavandeep has her path, I have my path. Rumi once said, there's 1,000 ways to kneel and kiss the ground. There is no one path.
No.
And we're just exposing people to one of the many options. And that's what we do with this show. But find an option. And I'm preaching like I do at the end. I'll stop. Go ahead.
So once we move past that, then we get into the asana, which is what most people are familiar with yoga.
That's what they call yoga.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And we, in the West, in our Western mind, we have a habit of compartmentalizing things. We don't look at things as a whole. We look at psychology and philosophy and sociology all as different traditions when really they all came from Greek philosophy. So again, when you look at the bigger picture, you get the wholeness, and in my experience of my path of healing, we can't just heal our mind, we can't just heal our body. It has to be a collective, holistic healing.
And the postures bring the two together.
Yes,
So
absolutely.
when we're going to get to this in a little bit, I keep promising everybody, we're really going to get there.
Edge of the seat.
How does that happen? What do the postures do that connects the body and the mind?
Well, when you sit down to do a posture, or you sit down to do a yoga experience or meditation, the mind is instantly going to start fighting with you. We call it the monkey mind. I have to go do this. I forgot to email this person. Oh, I'm late on my mortgage. The mind will do anything it can to trick you out of being still, because the mind doesn't want to be controlled. The mind loves to be in control, and when we allow that monkey mind to regulate our lives, things end up pretty chaotic. We aren't aware of situations and how we create patterns and how we keep going back to those patterns, whether they be patterns from childhood or patterns from reincarnation, if we believe in that line of thinking. So having that discipline, and again going back to the yamas, the disciplines and the niyamas, practicing discipline, and it's not about perfection, it's about being aware in our every word and our every action to keep working closer to those goals. And through practicing that discipline, it gives us the ability to sit in a posture. And through sitting in a posture, and then the next we'll look at breathing, we're able to sit in those postures and quiet the mind. So again, all of the limbs are interconnected. There really can't be one without the others.
And we are not here to demonstrate our ability to be the most flexible in the room,
Right.
or to hold the postures for the longest.
Right. In Kundalini Yoga, we say we teach the students, not the postures. It's not about your ability to perfect cobra pose or warrior pose. Or it's not about the perfection. It's about the inner experience. And Kundalini Yoga is nicknamed the yoga of awareness because it does raise that level of awareness.
So the next on our list is?
Next is pranayama. So again, the breath, it gives you the ability to sit through the asana. And asanas can be painful at times. Again, that's where the discipline comes in. So the belief in yoga is that our breath is our connection to the guru. The guru is someone that takes us from darkness to light. And it's not a person. It's just the environment. It may come through a person, but it's the teacher. It's our teachings that come directly from God.
It's back to disciplines.
Right.
Yeah.
Exactly. And through our breath, we can access this innate wisdom that we have deep within us, that God consciousness, that Christ, universal Christ consciousness. So control of the breath is a huge, huge part. They're all huge integral parts in yoga. And another, I think, important factor in yoga, in the pranayama specifically to point out, is yogis spend their lifetime making friends with their own death. That's something that's very taboo in our culture. We fear death, we fear aging, we fear the wisdom that comes with it. So with pranayama, there's practices where we hold our breath out and we meditate on our death, so that when that time comes, we'll be conditioned to welcome it with open arms, as it's just a transition back to the source or into reincarnation or whatever the belief system is.
Let me jump in here and see if this understanding jives with what you're talking about. We have various levels of perceptions of what we are. And the first level is the physical. And we see that as a force, as an energy. But the physical is then driven by something greater than that, and that's the prana, which is basically a life force. Mm-hmm. And then if I understand correctly, the Kundalini is then the overseeing life force. It's the eternal, the everything life force that comes in. And so it's on the reverse level. That the more we practice, the more we get through the layers, so to speak.
Basically, the Kundalini doesn't come from outside in. It's something that's untapped within us. And the belief is it sits at the base of your spine, curled up in 3 circles. And through the practice of controlled breathing and through the practice of postures, which we'll demonstrate soon, that...
That's my line.
That is, it's unlocked. And to get out of the ethereal, mystical terms, what we're working with is the primal energy of the cerebral spinal fluid in Kundalini Yoga, and pulling that energy up the central channel of the spine using certain locks, which we call bandhas in the body, diaphragms to push the energy up into the spine until that fluid reaches our brain. And that's where the healing begins, is when that fluid begins to submerge into the brain and repair synapses. And there's actually a lot of interesting studies coming out of Harvard with Kundalini Yoga practices and recovery from depression and anxiety and brain injuries.
Yeah, there's been studies like that. I get I think it's Yoga International. It's put out by the Himalaya Institute, and I'm an ongoing member there. And I get the quarterly Yoga International. They always quote these studies. It's fascinating, the things they're finding out about the postures, they're finding out about the meditation. The whole process is just so powerful. And, they're like, we just discovered something. No.
No, we're finally reaching the technological ability to
measure it.
Exactly.
Yeah,
We're catching up finally.
So we're up to what, number 5?
Yes, the pratyahara. The pratyahara can be...
I'm so glad you're doing these, because I've never pronounced them.
It's taken some practice. So the pratyahara might be a difficult concept to understand. It's the synchronization of the senses with thoughts. So again, it comes down to disciplining the mind. We create our own reality through our thoughts, and our thoughts are directly connected with our emotions. And again, kind of getting back into the clinical aspect, cognitive behavioral theory.
Yeah, just recognizing, what am I thinking?
Right, and behind every thought there's a feeling, and behind every feeling there's something that triggered that. So again, slowing down the mental process and then being able to synchronize those thoughts with your actions and with your senses.
Key point. I'm so glad you made that point. Slowing down the mind.
Yes.
When we slow it down, let's get a little clinical here. We get into that place of non-cognitive areas of the brain.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you're familiar with Swami Rama.
Yes.
Yeah, he was the guy who founded the Himalayan Institute here in the United States. When he first came to the United States, he went to, it was the Meminger Institute, I think it's either St. Louis or Kansas City. And they had him wired up. And with all these instruments and everybody watching, he did things they didn't believe were possible. He changed his brainwave patterns on command from alpha to beta to delta. He was able to control his respiration and heart rate. He made growths come on his hand and then just made them go away again. And they were like, this can't be happening. But that's what happens when you slow everything down. You get into that level of the core of the brain that's in control.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Marvelous stuff. Keep going, girl.
Okay, so where are we? We covered the pratyahara, so then we get into the dharana, and the dharana is one-pointed concentration. Again, something that we're not really familiar with in this culture because we're taught to do more, achieve more. It's all about the physical world. But one-pointed concentration comes from the practice of slowing down the mind, the discipline, the staying in the postures. They keep building.
Building on each other.
I'm so glad you made that point. So when we're sitting in meditation and we find that the monkey mind begins to wander and to think about all these things that have already happened today and these emotional responses and these traumatic memories, and the brain just goes and goes and goes, and they say in yoga that for every one blink we think 1,000 thoughts, but we can only capture so many of them. So when we sit in that meditative pose and we're controlling our breathing and the mind still begins to wander. In Kundalini Yoga, we instruct our students to come back to the mantra Sat Nam. Sat meaning truth, Nam meaning identity. Truth is my name. And for every breath they take, they breathe deeper and deeper into that truth.
And that is not just the mantra, but the focus is part of every meditative practice.
Yes.
Whether it's watching your breath, whether it's having a mantra, whether it's... We had a guy on here a few years ago, I forget his name. Very nice. Anyway, and what he taught was to focus on, what ties it with your Kundalini, on the third eye. Because as you wrap around the head of the snake and the head of the only place that the human head and the spiritual head meet are right here on the third eye, and that's what he would have as his focus. But it doesn't matter what you focus on. It's getting into that place of the deep meditation,
absolutely,
the one-pointed concentration.
Absolutely.
And then we are at the top of our list.
So another point I just wanted to add on to what you had just mentioned, the sixth eye, or the sixth chakra, third eye, it oversees the pituitary gland. Again, that's, as you were saying, a point of meditation and one focused concentration. And when we focus on that, biologically, it stimulates the pituitary gland by putting pressure on the optical nerve, which causes this rush of neurotransmitters in our brains that cause deep relaxation and then travel through the bloodstream. So it's just an amazing process of how our bodies work so intricately to be these perfect machines that, when practiced, can reach that God consciousness, that unification.
And how they were discovered without all the technology.
Right.
Thousands upon thousands of years ago, that they knew this worked. Didn't have to know how it worked, didn't need to know anything except we do this, it works.
Absolutely. It makes you wonder where it came from.
And it's just about getting rid of all that thinking. I don't have to know how it works.
Right.
Understanding it doesn't matter. I have to accept it and do it.
Absolutely. And that's where the faith and the belief comes in. So then we get to the deep meditation, the dhyana. And that deep meditation, and again, meditation is just simply quieting the mind. And Yogi Bhajan, the spiritual teacher whose teachings I follow, he would say that meditation was the garbage man. It would come to clean out the subconscious, because every thought that we're not able to process consciously in those 1,000 thoughts that come per blink of the eye, they get pushed back into the subconscious. And once our subconscious becomes so full, it begins to overflow with that garbage. And that's where those reactions that we don't know where came from. Oh, that wasn't me. I would never say something like that. So that daily practice of deep meditation is so essential for emotional well-being, for physical well-being. And then through that deep meditation, we reach samadhi, where we began. And that's the awakening of the spirit and complete absorption in the spirit. Living life through soul eyes rather than our physical eyes.
So now what we've both promised everybody was going to happen is going to happen. We're going to get into Kundalini, what we've touched on it. Let's review that, and let's talk about the yoga and talk about, we're going to have this wonderful demonstrator who's going to do the poses, and you're going to talk us through. And can you see through me?
I can very well.
So I turn it over to you, and I turn it over to Morgan.
Okay, so just to recap quickly, the Kundalini is that primal life force energy that's believed to sit untapped inside of us at the base of our spine, our cerebral spinal fluid in Western medical terminology. And through sequences of breathing and mantra and asanas and all these different practices, these different disciplines, we learn to consciously raise that energy up with the intent of becoming more awakened in our life and with the end goal of living in that absorption of the spirit. So our beautiful, talented model Morgan will be demonstrating some practices in Kundalini Yoga.
So she's in a posture now.
Yes.
Hands together over the heart chakra.
Yes, prayer pose. Prayer pose, also referred to as easy pose. You can sit in a comfortable position. The great thing about Kundalini Yoga is it meets you where you're at. They say even quadriplegics can do the yoga because it's all about the breathing and the experience within. So you can do these exercises in a chair, you can do them laying down, you can do them sitting in whatever posture is comfortable. And then the hands in prayer pose, she's putting about 5 pounds of pressure on her sternum with her thumbs. And right in that area is a nadi. A nadi is basically an acupressure point in the body. And this specific point connects the heart chakra to the sixth chakra, the pituitary gland. It connects our thinking in our minds with the thinking in our hearts. Again, a practice that's seen around the world, learning to be more heart-centered rather than centered in the mind. And her eyes are closed down. Currently, she's focusing up at the pituitary gland, stimulating some hormones that cause deep relaxation.
Is your talking at all interfering with her process?
No.
Okay.
No. So she's going to go ahead and demonstrate the Adi mantra. The Adi mantra is what we tune in with every time before we do any Kundalini Yoga practice. So if you could go ahead, Morgan. Beautiful. And the mantra she just sang is Ong Namo Gurudev Namo. We repeat that 3 times. And the translation is greetings to the Creator, greetings to the teacher within. Or I bow to the Creator, I bow to the teachings within.
And is that specifically harmonized for the body?
Yes. The reason that we're told that it's important to tune in when you're about to start a meditative practice in this lineage is when our minds, we're out rushing around in rush hour getting things done, we're on a different frequency in our mind, a different energetic vibrational level. So you wouldn't want to try to cook a recipe while watching ESPN. You would want to turn your TV to the cooking channel for the activity that you're going to be doing. So this tuning in, this mantra, sets your mind into that meditative space to begin your practice with reverence and with intention.
So we start with the connection between the mind and the heart.
Yes.
Then we attune the two of them with the mantra.
Yes.
Go ahead.
Okay, so now she will go ahead and demonstrate the spinal flex, placing her hands on her shins, and elbows are going to be straight. She's going to begin breathing, inhaling forward, curving the spine forward, exhaling back, neck is in neck lock, and she's going to continue with this powerful breathing and this motion. And what she's doing right now, as you can see, is flexing the spine, warming the spine up, warming up that cerebral spinal fluid. And with her neck in neck lock, this is another very important aspect in yoga, is you're dropping the brainstem into the spinal column so that as that fluid, that primal fluid and that energy begins to move up the spine, it gets to the brain.
So she's basically pumping.
Yes. She's using her body as a hydraulic, essentially.
Okay.
And go ahead and inhale. Apply root lock. Focus on the brow point. Press the tongue on the roof of the mouth. And the sequence, what she's doing is she's using the diaphragms in her body, and exhale to again push that energy up, draw the energy up by focusing on the brow point, by pressing the tongue against the teeth on the roof of the mouth. She's stimulating 84 meridian points in the body, the same meridian points worked with in Chinese medicine. So as you can see, there's a lot going on. The pranayama aspect, the breathing completely into the lungs and exhaling completely, expands the lung capacity, bringing more oxygen into the blood, nourishing every tissue, every cell, bringing more oxygen into the brain, balancing both hemispheres of the brain. So again, there's a lot going on physiologically and mentally. And as she was inhaling, in her mind, she's repeating Sat, and on the exhale, Nam, and that's where that one centered pointedness focus comes in.
And now she's in a basic meditative pose, and you've used the term mudra. Maybe we ought to explain it to everybody.
Absolutely. Mudra is something that always mystified me. I would see statues with even Christ using mudras, and Buddha, and just all these spiritual teachers around the world, and I didn't quite know what they meant until taking the International Teacher Training course. that I had taken with Yoga Santa Fe. So currently she has her hands in Gyan Mudra. Each finger represents a energetic principle. The index finger represents Jupiter, which is wisdom and expansion. The middle finger represents Saturn, which is judgment and teaching. The sun finger, the ring finger, represents the sun, and that's vital life force energy. And the pinky finger represents Mercury, which is communication. And the thumb always represents ego. So you're connecting the ego with each of these principles through mudra. And mudra essentially means seal.
And the open posture also allows for the flow in and out of the minor chakras.
Yes, absolutely. Having the spine straight, chin in, chest out, again, opens the spinal column. A lot of the practices we do open the spinal column, as in several other yogas, to allow that energy a clear path up and down the spine. So now
what's happening now? Go ahead.
She's going to begin ego eradicator. Her elbows are going to be straight, arms at 60 degrees, thumbs are up, thumbs again representing the ego. Eyes are closed. She'll be focusing on her brow point and beginning a powerful breath of fire.
So she's pumping again.
Yes, as you can see, she's stimulating her third chakra. That's the navel point.
Yeah.
That's the place of willpower, your place of truth, your ability to project the truth of your personality. And with the arms up, she's creating a burst of energy, basically, into her electromagnetic field. And go ahead and inhale.
When she does these pumps, does she do them for a specific number of pumps, or does she do them until she feels a certain response?
Well, again, it's all up to the student. It's where you're at.
Okay.
And for this demonstration, she's only doing them for a few seconds just to demonstrate what it would look like. In a Kundalini Yoga class, typically the shortest amount of time you would ever do an exercise as part of the Kriya. And Kriya means complete action. It's a series of specific exercises to create a specific result. So typically it's about 1 minute minimum, up to 5 minutes maximum.
Okay. So you're still waiting to feel something?
Yes.
And when you feel it, you know you've just stopped that particular aspect, that posture?
Yes and no. You want to be able to really challenge yourself and listen to the wisdom of your body, push past the ego in the postures and the exercises. When you start to feel something, that may just be the beginning of the unlocking of the energy. So sometimes not sometimes, most of the time, it's great to push past your comfort zone as long as you're not going to injure yourself.
Okay.
So now I will go ahead and have her demonstrate Sat Kriya. If you can come up on your knees in rock pose. And hands are going to be in Venus lock, right thumb over the left. Fingers folded down, index finger pointing up. Index finger's pointing up. Again, that's the Jupiter finger. Her arms are straight above her head, hugging her ears, spine is straight. And begin the mantra.
Sat Nam, 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 Sat Nam.
And inhale. Suspend the breath, focus at the brow point, squeeze the root lock. And exhale and release. So this specific exercise I wanted to demonstrate. In Kundalini Yoga, we have a theory that all addiction and mental health issues are caused by the first 3 chakras being shut down. And this is the most valuable exercise for anyone who is afflicted by any of those conditions. It's advised that anyone suffering depression, anxiety, addiction issues, do this for a minimum of 3 minutes a day. And it automatically kicks those chakras into place. The suicidality disappears, the judgment. So it really assists with so many different aspects. And I'm saying this from a personal experience. This was the only exercise that I could remember from any of the classes I took. And when I was just in a desperate place, I would drop to my knees and do this for as long as I could until I felt something, and that was enough to carry me through to a daily practice.
I had a conversation with a yogi years ago, and we talked about it. Just what you're talking about it's so important that you hear about all these yogis who have these sexual escapades and everything, and they have all this accumulation of things. And what he said to me was so profound. He said it's because they're so focused on the higher chakras, they forget about their lower chakras.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Absolutely.
So we're back to where we started.
Yes, back to where we started. And I believe the last demonstration we'll go ahead and do is a very much rooted meditation in Kundalini Yoga. It was said that if you lose all teachings, keep this one. So go ahead and come into easy pose, please, Morgan, and prepare for Kirtan Kriya. Hands are on the knees in Gyan Mudra. And go ahead and begin the mantra for a few moments.
Satanama, 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 Satanama.
And inhale. Suspend the breath, focus at the brow point. So in this specific exercise, we all know that our body, our nervous system, is an intricate system of electrical signals. No? So our fingers are directly connected to our brain's electrical functioning. So the first finger, the Jupiter finger, is positively charged. Second finger, negatively charged, positively charged, negatively charged. So by alternating the pressure on the fingertips, we're stimulating those parts in our brain, bringing our brain into balance. Another key aspect of that specific meditation is the visualization. You're visualizing divine light coming into the seventh chakra, the crown of the skull, hitting the pineal gland and coming out of the forehead, hitting the pituitary gland. So there's a flow of L energy that you're visualizing as you're doing this meditation, which again stimulates those two glands, connecting them together. And as we know in Western science, these glands are responsible for mass amounts of dopamine, endorphins, and serotonin. So they are so valuable. The correct functioning of these glands are of the utmost importance in physical well-being and our ability to heal.
All the feel-good stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely. Who needs drugs when you learn to meditate?
Really?
Absolutely.
I think we have to put an end to it. We're starting to run down on time.
Absolutely. Moving right along. Thank you so much, Morgan.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, definitely. Thank you.
Satnam.
Satnam.
So, let's give you a chance. You have any announcements you wanted to make?
Sure. I wanted to go ahead and invite anyone who's interested in learning more about Kundalini Yoga to look up Yoga Santa Fe, a wonderful yogic community here in Santa Fe. And we always have great activities going on. We not only do classes, we do community events, community kirtan, which is repetitious, beautiful music. We do sadhana in the mornings together. We have all-day yoga intensives, concerts, etc. So please look us up at yogasantafe.com.
And I want to make just a couple of announcements. You all have heard this before if you watch this show. I am a counselor. I do spiritual counseling, and I am available for anybody and everybody. There are no fees. I work on a donation basis. It's not up to any one person to take care of me. God does. So if you have any issues with life or you want to talk about spirit, be happy to meet with you. Also, got a brand new website. I am on, well, not I am, but Church of the One God, which is my organization, is on Facebook. And Words of the Prophet shows is going to be, there's one show, and I'm going to start getting more of them up there on YouTube. So you can check into the archives and watch past shows. There's going to be a listing on my website as to what shows are there, and you can link from my website to YouTube. YouTube channel is uppercase COTOG1, Church of the One God 1. And Facebook is Church of the One God, spelled out. And all that will be rolling at the end of my credits. So we've got a few minutes left. Do you have a parting thought?
Well, I'd just like to attest to how far my life has come and the dramatic transformation that has happened in the last 4 years of being on this yogic path, my recovery path, my path of healing. I had an onset of debilitating post-traumatic stress disorder when in my first year of recovery, and I didn't think that I was going to be able to function in life. I stuck to my belief in the teachings. For some reason, I just knew that this technology would bring me through what I needed to be brought through. And today, I not only own my own business, ISIS Industries, I just now founded a nonprofit called the ISIS Project, where our mission is to serve men and women in order to connect with their divine essence as a community resource. And with the end goal of assisting people to reach their true potential through a group consciousness. And our first project, I am proud to announce, is a recovery ranch for human trafficking survivors, which is currently underway. We're working on getting funding right now. Another great thing, I'm actively involved in speaking, setting up several different speaking tours currently, and writing a book on my life experience and my path in healing. And that's just the testament where this technology can take you in such a short amount of time.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm honored to be on your show.
Good to have you. Yeah, we're going to close with that thought. You know, you've watched me here for a few years. Maybe you've listened to me on radio for a decade. That's what we're talking about, healing. You know, we've had people from all walks of life, people who've had physical ailments who told doctors basically, no, I don't buy into that, I don't accept that, and I'm going to heal. That's the power of the spirit. And we've had people like Pavandeep, the same thing. You know, we can be damaged in a lot of different ways. And that's, you know, the vulnerability of the body. But the spirit heals all. So there's two things here. One is you do a practice for yourself, whatever that is. You know, if you like what you hear here, you've seen contact information for Pava, contact her. If you missed it, contact me, I'll put you in touch with her. And then get out there and demonstrate this to the world. We spend too much time hurting each other. And the people who usually get hurt the most are the young and the innocent. And that's not okay. So do something, get involved, be something that shines a light in this world as you walk through it. Join us again next week. We're here, you know, whatever time you're watching us, we're on 4 times a week, and you will find us the same time next week. So until then, walk in love and light. Know that you are God, not just one with God. Your job is not to let God in your life. Your job is to let God out. Thank you. Blessings to you all. I'm Reverend Phil, and I've been your host for Words of the Prophets. Thank you for tuning in. Please join me again next week, same time, same channel, for more Words of the Prophets.